Well, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining Allyson and I today for what I think will be a very insightful and entertaining conversation. Mark already introduced Allyson, but she is the Corporate Vice President and Global Chief Marketing Officer of Nissan Motor Corporation. And he also introduced me, but I just wanted to touch on the fact that I do focus on the automotive category, which means that every topic today I have a lot of burning questions for Allyson, but they'll be near and dear to my heart. So to kind of kick us off, as we all know, the automotive industry is really at an inflection point. So there's new technologies abound, and also consumer expectations are continuing to shift. I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to talk to you about that today because Nissan really, as a brand and organization, has been able to remain at the forefront of innovation, but also keep on the pulse of consumers. Nissan is a leader in the automotive category, if you didn't know that, but they are also the pioneer of electric vehicles, which is that's a flex, I would say, as my kids say. So thank you for taking your time out to talk to us during this crazy week. Yes. Sorry guys, I talk with my hands and I have a car and a handheld mic, so it's going to be a challenge. But first of all, congratulations on your current role, but also congratulations on all of your successes at Nissan over the years. I thought maybe we could start, if you don't mind, to tell us a little bit about the journey of how you got here, personally and professionally.
Sure. I've been in the automotive industry my whole career. I started first consulting an agency side for some German brands, for a Swedish brand, and then I was always consulting agency side. And then I always refer to it, I got a phone call that changed my life, and Nissan was looking for a head of marketing for Infiniti. And I was actually, I was doing an expat assignment in Amsterdam at the time, and they're like, we're looking for, I was like, finally, I got that client call. I'm ready, I feel like I have the right experience, I've had global experience. And they're like, you just need to move from Amsterdam to Nashville, Tennessee. I was like, I've never been there, but let's do it. So I went, I led the Infiniti brand. Shelley Pratt is here, she now leads it. It's in very good hands with her. And so I was there for a few years. We had some great work, we had some incredible products that we were able to launch. And then I was offered the opportunity to work in our global headquarters in Japan, and kind of in a CMO #2 position in Japan. And so I lived and worked in Japan for 2 years, which was incredible. I led all of our global markets from a creative standpoint, from a media standpoint, global agency network, sponsorships, kind of et cetera, et cetera. And then I was able to come back to the U.S. as the U.S. CMO about 5 years ago, actually, and led that. And obviously, I don't know if anyone else feels this way, but kind of 2020 through about mid-2022 feels like 1 year, just because of
that will never get back.
No, yeah, exactly. COVID in the automotive industry, obviously the supply chain challenges were huge for us. But I think we were able to really use that time to reset, focus on customer experience, focus on we were in the middle of a product transformation, which was amazing, and we got a lot of success. We had a lot of success during that time, especially during a very difficult time. And then in April, I was promoted to global CMO, so I moved back to Japan, and that's now where I live. And it's great to be back in the U.S. But that's my journey.
Thanks.
Not quite an elevator speech, but hopefully.
No, but that's a lot to be proud of. I want to talk a little bit about the changing landscape just in general. So many industries are facing change. We talked about it, but I think automotive after spending my career in automotive, I think the last 4 years, auto has had to pivot more than ever. And there probably really isn't even a normal that we're getting back to. One thing though about the automotive category is that they've always kind of set the tone for innovation from a manufacturing standpoint especially. And they offer key learnings for other categories. What do you think the state of the auto industry is today?
I would say the state of the automotive industry is complete disruption right now. I think we're a very mature industry, heavy equipment manufacturing. It is not always the easiest to change. And I think with COVID and with the supply chain shortage, with kind of the increased interest in electrification and alternative fuel solutions driven by consumers, I think that's created a complete disruption that we're seeing. I think the other thing that we're seeing disruption is customer experience. And consumers are there's so much, this is a pun, it's an auto pun, so forgive me, but consumers are in the driver's seat, very much so. They are driving the decisions. It's no longer kind of us in the ivory tower, at the manufacturer, and just here's the car, take it. We're gonna maybe make it, affordable for you or accessible for you. It's so much less about that, and what we're really learning, and it's been such a process, is that how we engage with them, where we engage with them, how we have two-way discussions instead of one-way discussions. All that has completely changed, not just from a marketing standpoint, but also from a product standpoint. And then the other thing that's just been kind of, over the last probably, I would say 2 years, is the introduction of the Chinese local brands. And it's a little bit less of an impact in the US than what we're seeing in other parts of the world, but China, every month they launch kind of 40 plus models, new models. Many of them are local electric brands, some of them are bigger. What's been interesting about that is that they have they've taken a complete startup mode and been able to have very rapid design and production and technology, and they're treating the cars very much as software and these connected experiences, specifically in the inside of the vehicle. And there are incredible things that those brands are doing. And I think, obviously, that's great. We don't want them to be too good at that, though, especially as a more long-standing manufacturer. But what we're doing is we're being inspired by them, and we're allowing them to push us to provide those same types of solutions. And so we're completely changing, how we're going to market, how we're planning products. A typical automotive life cycle is 7 years, and that's kind of what that time frame is. And so many things happen in 7 years. And so I think the good thing is that it's a catalyst for us to change, but it's a very welcome change, I think. And I think it's one that consumers are wanting, and we need to do it this time.
In terms of some of those experiences in vehicle that you were talking about, can you give us a tease of anything that we could be excited for?
Yeah, I'll have to do my typical PR, I can't announce anything that's confidential still, but it's very much about what the experience is going to be in the car. Connectivity is going to be really, really important. How do you live it? How do we leverage data? How do we do that in a privacy-safe way? But how do we create fully connected experiences? I think so much in the past it's been, you're on this channel, and you're on this channel, and those are completely different experiences. And we're to the point now with the technology. I think we have that on the media side. We also have it on the product side. How do we connect all those experiences so we let the consumer know that we know about them, we know what they're interested in a creepy way. But we know what they're looking for, and we're able to adapt to it. Your vehicles are become much more adaptable to what you need, and that's what I'm most excited about.
Perfect. In your global, I keep saying this, but because global is kind of a unique responsibility, for a global company, maintaining brand relevance in specific markets that vary from a cultural standpoint, but also staying true to Nissan brand and the company ethos, it has to be a challenge. So what's your driving force for your marketing? What are your guiding principles?
Yeah, I think, obviously we're a global manufacturer. We operate in over 200 markets and importer markets. So I think we have a very large global footprint. I think the first thing is being very clear on what your corporate principles are. Our corporate purpose is driving innovation to enrich people's lives. And it's really about how do we create a much more consumer-oriented experience in the car and everything that surrounds that. And then through that, and where we think our differentiator is really around the excitement that we can bring. And when you think about products that we have today, what we've had in the past, Leaf was the first mass-produced electric vehicle. GTR, it doesn't get more exciting than that. But when you think about that, that's where we've been as a brand. We've been this brand that's been very daring. We were started as a company to be a different type of Japanese automotive manufacturer. And there's this internal saying that our founder said, which was dare to do what others don't. And it's really about kind of pushing the boundaries when it comes to technology, when it comes to how we market, when it comes to the experiences around the car. And so we really take that and internalize that. And how do we keep modernizing that? How do we keep kind of pushing ourselves as a company to provide very thrilling experiences for consumers? And around the world, and I think to me, the thing is we have to be very clear on that, and that is very clear. And then how that comes to life globally, we do not believe in one size fits all. We believe that cultural relevance in each market is incredibly important. So the brand is going to be in a different state of maturity, and the taste and needs of consumers in the UAE, as it is, it's going to be very different in Brazil. It'll be different in the US. It's very different in Japan. And we respect that, we appreciate that, and we want to be relevant to our consumers. So we have a very clear strategy, but how it comes to life in our markets, that would be locally relevant to those different markets.
Perfect. I want to dig a little bit more into cultural relevance and talk about cultural moments and your philosophy on aligning your brand to that. When does it become magic? How does it, really propel your brand forward?
I think, the cultural relevance, that's always important. I think consumers have so many choices. How do you break through? I think the customer shopping process is so complicated now. There's so many different touch points that we have to insert ourselves into cultural moments. And so I think for us, what we look for ways that we can break through. What are ways that we can be authentic and credible in those moments? I think Heisman is a great example. We've been any predictions. Well, it was just announced a few weeks ago, so I don't know about next season. But I think this was an idea where we were looking for something where live sports. Everyone wants to get into live sports, but how can we have something that's ownable? So it's not here's the quarter of the vehicle with 4 doors. That's kind of how we're starting to compartmentalize this. We wanted to have something that we could own and a space that we could own, and this happened several years ago. But we believed in it so much that we kept it going. It's been 14 years now that we've done that. And so I think that's an example of it. And I think we continue to look at that at a global level. We've gotten out of, we want to make sure that what we do can spread globally if there's something that we're going to look at globally. And pole to pole is an example of what we've done at a global level where actually we worked with EV influencers who wanted to actually take our Nissan Aria from the North Pole to the South Pole. And so we worked with them, we outfitted it, we created, basically we followed the journey along the process. It was very social oriented, and it was just amazing to see it. And actually right before the holidays, they actually made it to the South Pole. And just see the vehicle perform. And the car did not break down. The support vehicle did, but the Nissan Aria did not break down. And I think in those moments, it's, if there wasn't anything that naturally fit to align yourself with culture, create it. And that's an example of where we created it.
That's great. Obviously, to be able to develop this type of creative, you have to stay inspired. Where do you look for inspiration? And how do you motivate your team to stay inspired?
Yeah, I think it's creativity. It's so interesting because you have to constantly be inspired, right? And I think to me, I always get inspired when I go to our design studio because our design team is incredible. And you just kind of go and you talk to them and you listen to them about how they created something or the problem that they were trying to solve and how they looked at that. And so whenever I it's on the tougher days, it's like, okay, just go to the design studio and see what they're cooking up, and then you get re-inspired again. I think art and fashion and, those are all heavy influences for me. I also love to just talk to people and hear, what they're interested in, what's on your Netflix list, things like that, just to kind of understand what are people interested in. And I think, the interesting thing now is in my role is that I have to kind of take my American hat off, and I have to now try to understand what that means globally. And so that's a lot of talking to people and trying to understand and, remove any preconceived notions that I have and really just listen to people.
What are you streaming right now?
I went down, I got to the end of Netflix, I think, or the end of the internet actually, on mobster things. I watched Get Gotti. Has anyone seen that? It's so good. And then that inspired like a whole mob. I'm still on it. I restarted The Sopranos. So, I'm all in. So funny.
Can you talk a little bit about how you stay in sync? You talk a lot. I know Nissan is very committed to. You mentioned it several times. The consumer and what they want and their expectations. Is there a process? How do you stay in sync with the consumer?
I think we have ingrained consumer insights throughout every kind of part of the process. So, in automotive, we think about things upstream, so that's kind of in the product planning phase, and then downstream. And we have very clear touch points all along the way of where we interact with consumers to gauge, are we doing the right things? Are we thinking about developing these vehicles in the right way, the design, the packaging, the pricing, all of that. And then the same thing on the marketing side is, how do you, is what we're saying, does that going to be will that be impactful for the audience, and then kind of the post-analysis of it. And so I think that's the other thing for us as a team, and I have members of my team that are here as well, and I think we also get inspired by what consumers think about the brand. And it's so nice sometimes when you hear people just be like, I really love that, or, this was great. And so I think you get really good feedback, especially throughout the entire car making journey and the development cycle of it. But then also just like, what are they reacting to? What is it? And sometimes it's the simplest things that you didn't, maybe it wasn't intentional, but if it's something that they're loving, how do we lean into that?
And how do you know what's going to resonate?
Yeah, right, exactly.
Just one add-on, which you've kind of already touched on, but would love to see if you have anything else you'd like to add. With all the entries into the EV marketplace, what do you want our takeaway to be about Nissan? Is it the daring, dare to be different? Is it that you're tailoring every vehicle to be what the consumer wants? What was the key takeaway?
The key takeaway is that I would say it is the daring piece of it. I would also say we're being very intentional about how we're approaching, the shift to electrification. But it isn't just the shift to electrification. It's the evolution of people's relationships with their cars. And so I think, we haven't come out with a statement that we're making everything will be electric, by a certain time frame. We have a strategy called Ambition 2030, where we're anticipating to have a little over 50% will be electric, but that's going to vary by market because it's going to be based on what the consumer is offering. Consumers are in the driver's seat. They are going to dictate what they want. And it's on us, and we need to create the infrastructure and the processes around that to be able to adapt to that. So, and also, we've been in the electric game for a while. We are not new. We have been around. We have over a decade of being able to service and work with our dealers and understand what consumer needs are when it comes to electric, both in the shopping process and in the ownership process. So we have a lot of experience. We have a whole network globally of dealers that can help you with that process. And so we also see that as a differentiator as well.
Perfect. I'm glad you brought up Ambition 2030. I wanted to ask you about that. So you talked about it in terms of what it should mean to the consumer internally at Nissan. Does it transcend everything from how you run meetings to how you develop products? Is that how we should think about it?
Yeah, I think it's the focal point. It's where are we moving towards? And I think obviously from the product standpoint, it's that. And it's not just about, okay, here's the Nissan Ariya. It's actually about what is the technology underneath the hood of that. So, we're in development on all solid-state battery. And the reason why that's important is that is going to provide a significant cost reduction in electric vehicles. We're one of the first manufacturers to really, and hopefully we're the farthest ahead, I think we are, to be the furthest ahead in developing that technology. It will be groundbreaking in creating a much more accessible way for people to get into electric vehicles. And so I think it's a red thread through everything that we do. It's what we're constantly talking about.
Over the holidays, I spent a lot of time on Instagram. And I don't know if anyone saw the meme that made me feel super old, but it said that the Jetsons were actually set in 2024. So
I can't even believe that.
We all know that they were moving from place to place in flying vehicles, which we're not doing yet, but I wanted to see if you have any short-term and long-term predictions on the future of mobility.
Flying cars. It's funny because in a former life, we worked on something where we were talking about kind of flying cars and just like the expectation of that when things like that came out and kind of what the reality of it is. To me, I think the prediction is that consumers are much more so than they have in the past will very much be driving and dictating the types of automotive solutions that they're working on. The second piece of that is going to be what is the regulatory environment that surrounds that. Regulation has become really important globally, and it's really driving change. It's driving ways for us to have to adapt to things, and I think it's in a good way. But ultimately, consumers, if they If they don't want to buy those products, or those products aren't quite ready, then the regulation becomes kind of a moot point. The other thing that I think is really important in the trends and the predictions is around connected car and the sense of autonomous. And I think in different markets, the idea of autonomous driving varies. So some markets are more mature and they're thinking on that. Some are not quite. And I think it's a little bit more, it's more of a control thing that you're seeing. But I think that more autonomous solution, and on the Nissan side, what we're very much doing is that it's not really about, okay, now go sit in the back seat and you don't want to, nobody's going to be driving the car. It's actually going to be very much based on the consumer's choice. When do you want to lean in? When do you want to have that incredible driving experience? And when do you maybe want to have a little bit more comfort and convenience and maybe a little bit of productivity? And so we're looking at ways for how can you have both of those. And then the connected piece of it is really about creating those seamless experiences across the whole experience that you have with us as a brand.
The productivity sounds good to me. We're about to get our music playing us off, so this went by way too fast. I wanted to just say thank you so much. I think this will definitely be a highlight of my week and probably others, so thank you for taking the time. Can I just ask one more question?
Yes.
I just wanted to say, if you had to say what you'd like to be remembered, what would that be?
Being fearless.
Love it. Thank you guys so much.